Today we're looking at a Weissbier from one of the most highly regarded German brewers in the world. It's Augustiner's Weissbier. Hello and welcome back to the channel, and yes, today I'm taking a look at this. It is a Weissbier from German legends Augustiner. It rocks in at 5.4%, and incidentally this is one of the few Weissbiers from the larger, more known German breweries that I have never tried before, so I'm pretty excited for this one. In terms of a packaging prospect, this one is a hideous one to get across on camera. It's got this super reflective labelling. It's dark blue with a dark bottle and then just kind of chrome silver and hyper reflective white. If I lean it up there, you can just about get an idea of what's on the bottle. But yeah, needless to say, very difficult to film and photograph this thing. No labelling on the back, actually, this one. One thing that is worrying me slightly is if you can see at the bottom there, it says 10/24, which I can only assume, given that we're at the end of September 2024, is an expiration date, which means, well, I've got a few days left. By the time this goes out, it will indeed be the 10th month. It will be in October. It's September at the minute at the time of filming. Yeah, this might not be the freshest, which is a bit of a concern, but I didn't buy it that long ago, only a few weeks back, so we shall find out. But anyway, let's get it open, shall we? So, this is a Weissbier, so we're going to do it the proper method. Sadly, my only Weissbier glass is a Paulaner one, so apologies for the mixed branding. But anyway, let's get a nice, steady pour going. But you want a good amount of foamy head on here, but not too much. So, slowly does it. Slowly does it. Get it to the point that you just can't really angle it anymore. Slowly. And then pull it away, a centimetre or so in the bottom of the bottle, and give everything a bit of a swirl round. Get all of that yeasty Weissbier goodness in, and dunk it in, and hope that you don't overflow. But that looks like a pretty good glass. Now, I've got to say, this looks like one of the best Weissbiers I've had for a while. Incidentally, not had that many in recent months, but over the last couple of years I've had quite a lot, and this has got that massively big, rich, depthy orange hue that, in my experience, signifies that this is going to be a proper no-nonsense version. This isn't going to be a light Weissbier, just a slightly fruited pale ale. This is the real deal, and nice big foamy white head, bit broken up. That could be the age if it is a bit of an older bottle, but hey, it looks the business, really. From my point of view, it's really like a glowing bright amber. On the camera monitor, it's looking a bit dulled down, a bit dark, a bit brown, but I assure you, in real life, it is bright as it gets. Right then, those all important aromas. Now, as often is the case with a Weissbier, it can be difficult to get the aromas properly dialed because of that big, fat, pillowy layer of foam that sits on top. You stick your nose over. It's sweet, it's slightly citrusy, citrus peel, it's soft, it's got a big dump of that yeasty goodness that we are expecting. You know, that kind of banana, sweet shop, bubblegummy thing. It's something you get in Belgian beers, but Weissbiers as well. Yeah, non-yeast beers wouldn't really be beer, would they? Anyway, you get what I mean. And as I say, slightly fruited, soft, bit yeasty, sweet. It smells pillowy, which is a wild thing to say, but like, it's got this creaminess about it that you know isn't from a lactose additive or anything else. It's just this inherent body, something from that wheat, from that mash bill, and yeah, it smells very appealing. So let's give it a go, shall we? Cheers. Okay, this is a very, very good start. When I saw that colour, I did think the only other Weissbier that it really reminds me of, that depthy hue is the Franziskaner, which is pretty available these days. Like, it's a supermarket buy now in the UK, and it is the de facto big rich Weissbier. It's one of the richest that I've ever had anyway. I'm sure there are some smaller breweries in Germany and around the world doing really amped up versions, but the majority, especially the more modern interpretations, tend to go down this very light, zesty, spritzy route, whereas Franziskaner is a bit more doughy, it's a bit more condensed flavour, it's more saturated with those true yeasty, bubblegummy, foam banana notes, along with a good helping of malt as well. And yeah, as I say, that is the only other one visually that looks similar. And I can tell you that is not where the similarities stay. This continues with that. This is big, it is rich, it is depthier, it is one of the best Weissbiers in terms of my enjoyment of it that I've had for a good while. And I think some will pick this up and say, oh, it's not as thick, it's not as heavy, it's not as dominant as the Franziskaner, but I think that's to its benefit. This sits just kind of, if you imagine an array, a graph of all the Weissbiers, and on one end you've got Franziskaner, and on the other you've got, I'll be honest, I can't remember whose is the lightest. I'm kind of thrown up between one of the more generic Schneider Weisses or Paul Honor's Weissbier, potentially. But anyway, you've got that whole array, and say Paul Honor sits right on one end. This sits just next to it. Did I say Paul Honor or Franziskaner? Franziskaner is right on one end. This right next to it in that bigger, deeper, richer state. But actually, as a result, it creates this more balanced, more all-round positive. I'm getting the spritzy, I'm getting the fruit, I'm getting that nice, beautiful vibe, but it's not too light. It's not feeling like a... Well, let's be honest, if we're being really critical, some of those lighter ones, they come across a little bit Radler-esque in their delivery. This is full-bodied wheat beer, but just with the balance tipped to almost perfection. But that is flavour, and it's not to say there's nothing wrong about this either. The body is a bit splashy. The carbonation is a little poor as well. I'm not saying I want a big, hyper effervescent spritzer of a Weissbier, but this is a bit tame. I mean, if you look at the glass, you can see there is a good amount of carbonation, good amount of bubbles riding up the glass, but it's not translating onto the palate. It still comes across just a little flat. But that aside, it is pretty damn good. So, top to bottom taste test time, so you can understand exactly what is going on the tip of the tongue. Incidentally, over the whole range of the experience, right on the tip of the tongue is where the carbonation is at its best. It's a little bit spritzy, it's a little bit sharp, it's got some kind of pithy, lemon peel kind of notes going along with it, and a whole host of that sweet, bubblegummy, sweet shop banana foam thing from the yeast, but not too intense. It's in the sweeter end of that range, and as a result, it's a pretty good start. It's a little bit sherbety. It's all down the sweet shop vibe really at the front there, but it is nice enough. Anyway, mid palate. I hadn't picked up on this when I was just drinking it normally. The mid palate is pretty scarce of flavour. It really thins out. It doesn't feel bad on the tongue. It just almost clears every note. It's a palate cleanser at that point, really. It's almost sorbet-like in the way that it handles it. There's a tiny bit of bitterness running throughout, but there's no discernible flavour notes. It really is, across the middle of the tongue, just, yeah, a palate cleanser, and that really is it. But thankfully, it does all start to come back on the back of the tongue. And boy, does it come back, because you get flip back into that yeasty, again, bubblegum, foam banana thing, and the fruit builds. You're getting layers on top of it, pineapple, mango, kind of, tropical fruit flavours. They're coming in, and they are, I want to say, accurate. Like, we say a lot of beers taste like a lot of things, like New England IPAs often have these big, juicy, tropical fruit notes, but they are injected with a whole host of bitterness as a result of the hop oils that cause them. In this, I feel like you're getting the fruit in a balanced nature. It feels more real. It feels well, not like they've added the puree or the juice of the fruit, but just the experience feels somehow more legitimate than it does when it's driven by a huge amount of hops, and I don't really know how to explain that any better. Onto the aftertaste though. Slightly drying. It's at this point you realise it's gone flat, like there is no residual carbonation as you swallow, and you're left with this nice, slightly bread and butter puddingy malt sweetness that just flows through. A bit of the fruit's residually there, but it's not big. Again, slightly dry, minimal bitterness really by the time it gets down there. And overall, I'm a bit perplexed because once you break this down, it's maybe not that flavourful. But something about just taking a sip, it hits you in all the right places. Front of the tongue, back of the tongue, heaps and heaps of flavour. But mid-palate and aftertaste, not a great deal. And those are the two that tend to stick around. So actually it's a fantastic palate cleanser. This is a great beer to have with food if you're fed up of lager with your meals, because let's be honest, lager with most food is the best option. There are exceptions, particularly in British cuisine, which is questionable anyway. But you know, if you want something a bit different, this Weissbier would be a fantastic food pairing because it does cleanse the palate, gives flavour, doesn't stick around, doesn't overstay its welcome, and it has the... It's really odd because I feel like I'm contradicting myself. It feels big, it feels rich, it feels full until you start to tear it apart, and then you realise it's not there, but there's just enough at every single layer that during the normal sipping experience, I'd genuinely be hard pressed to think of a Weissbier I'd rather be drinking. If you're only having one, maybe that Franziskaner is a bit of a better option. But other than that, I'm really not complaining. That is absolutely fantastic. And to be honest, that is really all I've got to say about it. So as always, thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please like it. If you haven't already, subscribe if you will be so kind. And I'll catch you next time. Cheers.